For second and third year forensic science students, those years are nothing short of a nightmare. While regular medical students get 4 years of theory, we forensic students have to cram it all into just 3. I did my best, but by the end of my second year, I was buried under coursework: physiology, biochemistry, pathology, parasitology, and dental anatomy. It was too much to handle, and I ended up failing 2 major subjects, biochemistry and parasitology. That summer, I stayed home to study, missing out on my internship. It wasn't until the summer break of my third year that I could return to the forensic lab. It wasn't anything like the glamorous image I had in my head. Unless you volunteered for a homicide investigation, most of the work involved routine tasks like evaluating injuries, which never seemed to end. Sometimes unusual cases would come in, ones where forensic experts had to make a preliminary judgment before they could proceed with a deeper investigation. The first thing was to assess whether the death was a homicide. If it was, an autopsy would be necessary. If not, the case was closed and the body was handed back to the family. Making the wrong call could waste resources, and incorrectly ruling a homicide as natural death could lead to wrongful accusations. My third year was already in full swing when I returned. Less than 5 minutes after stepping into the lab, my phone rang. It was from the Tonluki police station. There had been an overnight death at a private residence. They didn't suspect foul play, but wanted us to take a look. When we arrived, the scene was nothing like what I expected. It was an apartment on the 5th floor of a building, and it wasn't even secured properly. Our investigation assistant, Tio Kwak, was checking the door, while 2 civil police officers were sitting with the husband and his child. The husband, tearful and visibly shaken, kept saying, "Why did she have to leave me like this? How am I supposed to take care of our kid?" The boy, just 7 years old, looked scared, but also confused, too young to fully understand what had happened. We began asking the police about the details. The officer said they had received the report early that morning. The wife, apparently fine the night before, was found unresponsive in her bed. There was no sign of forced entry, and the couple had always been known to have a stable relationship. The husband was still in disbelief, asking, how could she just die in her sleep? The scene seemed calm. There was no sign of a struggle. The apartment, though modest, was neat and tidy, suggesting the wife had been a diligent housekeeper. She was lying on the bed, neatly covered with a light blanket, her face calm and serene. But the stillness in the room was unsettling, and despite the heat outside, the windows were tightly shut and there was no air conditioning. I started examining the body. Her lips were bluish and her nails were purple, clear signs of asphyxiation. I made a note of it, and the civil police officer next to me nervously suggested it could have been a sudden death caused by a respiratory issue. The body showed no obvious signs of trauma, so it was still possible. But as I continued, something caught my eye. On her chest there was an odd bruise. The skin was pale, almost bluish, in an area where it shouldn't have been. It was subtle, but I noticed it right away. I turned to my superior, Officer Mark Thompson, who quickly examined the area. His expression became serious, and after pressing on the bruise, he nodded. This was no natural cause. Mark began carefully removing her clothes, and it was then we noticed the unusual discoloration. It became clear this was no accident. Her chest showed signs of external pressure, something that didn't align with the initial conclusion of natural death. Officer Mark Thompson paused, looked at me, and said, "This bruise is from pressure. She was smothered." The question now was, who could have done this and why? We continued with the autopsy. The internal organs showed congestion, a clear sign of suffocation. But the question lingered. Was this a crime of passion or something more sinister? Mark explained that sometimes people snap unexpectedly in a moment of overwhelming emotion. Unintentional killings that occur when someone loses control. The breakthrough came when we examined her mouth and nose. There was no visible trauma, but the pattern suggested she had been smothered with something soft, like a pillow. Then, we found an unusual piece of material, a soft, plush fabric in her mouth, embedded with skin cells. This material seemed to have been forced into her mouth. Mark looked at me and said, "It's a homicide. We've got enough to arrest." He turned to the husband, still sobbing uncontrollably. The case had taken a dark turn. What initially seemed like an unfortunate death was now a murder. As we made our way to the police station, I couldn't stop thinking about the case. The husband's emotional turmoil had driven him to do something unspeakable. Despite his outward calm, something had snapped that night, leading to this violent act. When I saw the suspect being escorted for questioning, I felt a sense of closure, though it wasn't the resolution I had anticipated. This case served as a painful reminder that not all crimes have clear motives. Sometimes it's a single, small moment that pushes someone past the point of no return. I walked away with more questions than answers. It was a reminder of just how complex human emotions are, and how they can shape our actions in ways we might never expect. Forensic pathology wasn't just about solving cases, it was about understanding the darkest parts of human nature and the impact of small decisions. And as I continued my work, I realized that being a forensic pathologist wasn't just about dissecting bodies. It was about finding the truth beneath the surface, no matter how uncomfortable it might be.